We will get underway. Welcome to this council meeting. I'll open with kia ora kia. Kia tau mai te maramatanga, kia tau mai te rangi Māori e, kia tau mai te kaha me te aroha mō tēnei kaupapa hui e tai ki e. Apologies. No. We have none. There is zero public forum. Declaration of interest. There is none. Late report. So late item, the reasons for which are outlined in the resolution. Someone move. Move, Councillor Mailing, seconded Councillor McKenzie. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against, carried. And that draws us to the single item, which seems simple when you first look at it, but obviously contains quite a bit more detail and information sitting behind it. So I will come across Amy. Are you the lead person in this conversation?
Thank you.
Amy, supported by Dwayne and Alan and Matt, I'm presuming.
Yes, that's correct.
Over to you, Amy.
I'm just going to take a few minutes to present the report and set the scene for your deliberations today. I'd also like to acknowledge that we did get the report to you late and we opened up the submissions to the public so you could also access them on Thursday afternoon. So, consultation on the annual plan ran for 2 weeks from the 12th to the 25th of May. The community were invited to indicate whether they supported the council's approach to achieving the proposed rates revenue increase of 8.8% for 2025-26 and provide feedback on the 15 proposals presented in the consultation document. The CD also briefly set out the increases that contributed to the higher than expected costs that took the forecast rates increase to 13.5% and what we have done to bring rates down, including re-evaluating insurance risk, reducing staff costs, council property sales and reducing consultant budgets. During the consultation period, managers were encouraged to communicate any changes in the area of activity included in the consultation document with affected or interested parties, and a public online consultation session was carried out on the 15th of June. Targeted consultation was also undertaken with Nelson City Council and the industrial water users affected by the water charge in the Nelson industrial water supply area. We received 153 submissions over the consultation period, 31 of which were from groups or organisations. An overview of the submissions is attachment 1 to the agenda report, and that's grouped by proposals. The feedback is also summarised in the report. 66 submitters did not support the council's approach to the rates revenue increase. 14 submitters supported the approach and 13 submissions were unclear. Notably, there was strong opposition from over 100 submitters to the proposed reductions in library budgets and consequential impact on services. As part of the annual plan consultation, a 2-week survey on paid parking was conducted via Shape Tasman with 347 responses. This is covered in the report and further detailed in attachment 2. Staff recommend confirming the introduction of paid parking for all-day off-street car parks in Richmond as proposed, but delay implementation until February 2026 rather than October this year. 3 requests for funding support were made by group submitters. They were the Motueka District Museum Trust Board to help cover increased costs, Keep Motueka Beautiful to upgrade and extend a footpath in sanctuary ponds and carry out weed control in the inlet, and the Motueka Heritage Wharf Restoration Group to assist in the renovation of the wharf, which is a council asset. Several other changes are proposed today as a result of submissions or further information becoming available. The net results of these changes is negligible and the overall rates increase for 2025-26 has remained at 8.8%, excluding growth and forecast net debt of $299 million, as was consulted on. Some of the key changes include a resource recovery centre adjustment of $310,000 due to the recently agreed reduction in waste disposal fees, and an associated request to the business unit to increase the distribution in the 26-27 financial year by the same. 3 additional capital budget changes, including provisionally increasing the capital stormwater budget by $1 million to possibly support land purchases to aid implementation of the Mapua Master Plan, bringing forward $250,000 to support the upzoning of 17 hectares of deferred land in Richmond South to allow growth to occur in a timely manner in the Section 8 water supply project, and defer $1.5 million of capital budget for the Dovedale water supply new source and raw water pipeline project. $25,000 of operating costs be provided to Nelson Tasman Chamber of Commerce, offset by a corresponding decrease in funding to the Nelson Tasman Business Trust due to their closure, and an increase to the mandated KiwiSaver employer contribution from 3% to 3.5% from 1st of April 2026, resulting from the recent central government budget announcement. The report we've prepared to support your deliberations today summarises the feedback we've received during the consultation period and provides advice from staff on some of the matters raised. You'll need to make decisions on the recommendations covered by the resolutions and matters to be included in the annual plan 2025-26 so that we can finalise this document for your consideration and adoption at the full council meeting on 25th of June. Thank you.
Thanks, Amy. Right, so it is now, I guess, open to, well, probably firstly questions or queries that anybody has on any of the items contained in the recommendations. Councillor McKenzie, then Councillor Maley.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Mayor. With respect to the, I've got it here. The, just bear with me for a moment, please. Yep, the landfill money. So we say that our change doesn't impact on rates because we're going to seek an increase in the distribution from the NRSBU. So is that, how do we know that they will agree to that?
It's the Regional Landfill Business Unit.
Oh, sorry.
That's right. Each year, both Nelson and Tasman ask the business unit for what they want for their levy, and then they incorporate that in their costings to work out the gate charges. So at this point in time, under the Commerce Commission requirement, we have to, as two councils, have to apply without colluding with one another. And whatever the lowest figure is the one that's chosen. So there is a risk if we put this amount in for next year to cover the loss for this year, is that Nelson may not put a corresponding figure in. We may end up in a difficult situation this time next year. But certainly the way it's set up now, we could apply for it, but we may not get it. Yeah.
If I could just, and so should the scenario play out that we don't get it, then we're automatically, hypothetically, got a $310,000 adverse variance in the actuals to budget in the year in question?
That's correct. Yes, that would be, yes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Maley.
I'd like a bit more background about the Motueka Heritage Wharf Restoration Project. I had read about it in the news media, but it hadn't been brought to this table and hadn't really been briefed on it. So, one, it's up to $200,000, and it seems to have come in at the last minute.
Excellent question.
Morning, councillors. Yes, I'm happy to provide any more information other than it's been a concerted, passionate effort by the Heritage Restoration Group, which is under the umbrella of Keep Motueka Beautiful, for probably about the past couple of years now. And they've managed to accomplish everything that we need to implement the project as soon as budget's implemented. So we're not waiting for consents, we're not waiting for any authorities. They've obtained an archaeological authority from Heritage New Zealand. They've established a consenting pathway, and they've raised $100,000 themselves through various donations, charities, and other funds, and have another further 25,000 committed, with a further application to the Heritage Lotteries upcoming in August, where that's where the range up to 200,000. If they are completely unsuccessful in the Heritage Lotteries, that pushes it towards that upper end. But they're going to be asking for 150, 160,000, which could pay for absolutely the lion's share of the project. And from council's perspective, having just recently confirmed that this is in fact our asset to maintain and repair, an opportunity like this doesn't come along every day to take care of something of this magnitude. Leveraging the efforts of a very, very passionate and committed community group. So it has come in at the last minute in terms of the annual plan submission. Partially that's because a lot of things have come together in the past few months that have enabled this project, really given surety of being able to implement it in the next financial year, which is why it's come in at this late minute. But because it is a capital asset and we can debt fund it, there is a minimal rates impact, at least in the short term, which is why it's in my mind, it's just too good of an opportunity to pass up at this point if there's the appetite there to support them.
Councillor Mailing, then if there are other questions in relation to the same topic, I'll take them now. I've just got one question. So what's the source of funding?
From us or from them?
No, from us.
It would be debt funding.
Yeah, I realise. So, but RFCs, how's it funded?
It's just general rate funded out of the coastal assets activity.
Okay, interesting. All right, Councillor Mailing and then Councillor Walker.
First, the next point is, do they have a resource consent to do this work? Because consenting in the coastal marine environment, until the government does its changes, is particularly difficult.
Yep, so the Heritage Restoration Group has come in, sat down with Life and our other planners here, confirmed that they do not need a resource consent. They just need this exemption to undertake the work in that coastal environment because it's relatively low impact to fix an existing structure. So they've done that work with our own planners internally, and we've confirmed that pathway there.
I'm sure lots of other people would like to get that sort of exemption.
Interesting. All right, thank you, Councillor Mailing. So we're just on that topic. So I know I've got Celia and Councillor Greening, or Councillor Butler and Councillor Greening still on the list from the more substantive conversations, but we'll just stick with this while we're on it. Councillor Walker.
Thank you, through Mayor. So this came to our community board and I was the only person who voted against it. So I voted against it on the fact that when it came to community board, they couldn't tell us what fund this money would come out of. So they had originally got $700 discretionary money, which started the ball rolling, but then came back and got a 10K special projects fund from us. And we made it quite clear at the early stages, we wanted that used on bricks and mortar, not on getting resource consents, because back then we understood you would have to get a resource consent. I note that that wasn't going to be used for bolts and nuts because they came back to community board. They presented this to us at our meeting at 25 to 50K max. And I note now it's gone up to 200 because they potentially might not get lotteries money. And I also note that now they don't need a resource consent. We also haven't seen, I personally haven't seen the scope of the project and why it has to be bigger than what I believe is Ben-Hur, when you could potentially remove some hazard without consuming that much money. We have a community that is squealing, as you all read in our submissions, about reducing hours in a library, which is the centre hub, the heartbeat of our community. We also have in this plan to bring forward $1 million out of RFC money for a swimming pool, which I guess I know that's capital, different from operating. And so our library hours are cut because of the operating costs. But I'm not so sure our community will swallow, doing a restoration project on a historical wharf, which, by the way, is not a wharf where boats or vessels will come and go from. So I really struggle with the fact that it went from 25 to 50 and I voted against it for my, and I'm still waiting for the scope and whether they could have reduced the project. I clearly asked for that. I've had nothing. Now it's in here up to 200K. I feel quite uncomfortable about that. And the same group, I might add, which is Keep Motueka Beautiful under the umbrella, I see that they've now got 5K in that annual plan, and yet Community Board were signing off extra money for them last month. So I have a few question marks around both of these line items in today's report.
Okay, response to any of those comments / questions?
I mean, I definitely acknowledge a lot of that. And it has been a rapidly evolving space. I can imagine, I don't know why, but the 25 to 50 could have been assuming they would get the lottery's funding. Because if they do get the lottery's funding, that's all we would need is 25 potentially, which is where it's up to 200. We have to acknowledge the possibility that they are not successful in getting the Heritage Lottery's funding. And then we do have to face the reality that the money that they have raised to date, maybe it can't be used, or maybe we can use it for a very, very scoped project. But it still is an asset that is in council's ownership now. To a certain extent, something has to be done about it. There's a legacy contamination issues, coal tar, that need to be at least contained. We don't need to remove it. And so that is probably something that can go to reducing project costs as well, not having to remove all of that. Can cap it, repoint the stone, rebuild the stone so that it's not exposed to the ocean anymore. But at a certain point, we as council need to do something with that structure. It's very unsafe for the public to use currently. I mean, even one of the heritage restoration folks, I think, broke his leg by slipping off of some of the stones. So, and they're still committed to fixing it. So that's determination for you. So it's a very bad time for it to come along. I will definitely acknowledge that.
Okay, so Councillor Hill, do you want to speak on this particular item, or is your hand up for the wider conversation?
This particular one at the moment.
Okay, yeah.
Thank you. So,
over to you.
Thank you. Could it come out of RFCs? Is there a really detailed business case, project case, scoping being done that council's happy with the standard of? And I think to the points that Councillor Walker was making, the idea of what could be phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3 in terms of what's essential now, and a question about, often with these, it's great when community groups pick up projects and run with them, and that's great, but our level of confidence in the ability of the group to produce this.
David.
I can address some of that, Councillor, in that TDC staff have been working closely with the group over the past couple of years as well, between the reserves, project delivery team, and myself, and putting some delivery rigor over the project. So making it clear that the actual execution of this project would need to be handled through the project delivery office so that it actually complies with our procurement standards and delivery standards. So that's definitely one aspect of the concern there. Just another point about the fact that it is a heritage structure. We do have a little bit of unspent money in a heritage fund within the environmental science area that could be used to service the debt in the short term, at the very least.
And RFC is not a goer?
That one's tricky. I think we excluded that from the possibility just because it's not on a reserve. It's not a reserves asset, so to speak, but it's something that could be debated.
If there's room for debate, then I'd want us to understand really clearly whether we could do that or not, and that's my preference, as it will come out of there if it's remotely possible.
Okay, thank you. So I've got Councillor McKenzie, Councillor Dowler, Councillor Maru. Councillor Butler, are you wishing to speak on this item? I've got you on the list for this.
No, it's okay. Not really. It is in relation to Motueka and the spending there, so it's sort of connected, but no, it's about the library.
Okay, cool. Yep, all right. Well, we'll come back to that in due course. So Councillor Mackenzie,
Thank you, through you, Mr Mayor. Can I just get confirmation when you talk about the nature of the work that's potentially going to get done? Can I get confirmation that it is indeed capital? Doesn't sort of sound capital in nature to me.
Yes, absolutely. It is a capital asset. It's a fixed, real thing, and we have to rebuild it. So much of the granite blocks and mortar work along the whole length of the wharf is severely deteriorated or actually collapsed in. So we have to obtain more granite blocks because some of them have just completely washed away, and repoint the whole thing, restack and rebuild it.
Councillor Mackenzie.
Was that confirmation from Mr Drummond?
Through you, Mr Mayor. The work would be capital because of the extensive nature of the renewal of the wharf structure. So if it was a much smaller project, you would say, oh, that's repairs and maintenance. I think the scope of the work and the extensive rebuilding makes it a renewal, which would be a capital project. In terms of the RFCs, the project wouldn't qualify for RFC funding because it's not in relation to growth. So it's very difficult to draw a line between restoring the wharf and growth across the district. So RFCs would not be a funding source.
I always find it interesting when consenting determines repairs and maintenance of a minor nature and doesn't need a consent, but finance determines a major project that is not repairs and maintenance and therefore is capital. It's the joys of the complexity of the world we live in. Councillor Dowler.
Yeah, well, I'm going to back up what Councillor Walker said, even though I did say yes at the community board regarding the funding side of it, but I also discussed at the community board about putting a line in the sand of how far we went with the restoration, i.e. cutting off the nose that's damaged and just shortening it up instead of rebuilding the grandiose piece of knob sticking out in the tidal estuary. Also, if you do that, you've got to go and carve all this rock out of one of the adjacent islands, which is where most of the costs are going to be. I've also asked for the team to have a look at the mud that's there, because several years ago a private company had offered to willingly go and restore the wharf by parking a barge there at night when the tide was out, digging out the stone that had just fallen off and landed in the mud, and then lifting them up. And then when the tide came in, they would lift them up and put them on the beach ready to be put back in place. I don't think that's ever been investigated yet, because there could be quite a lot of that stone laying in that mud that could be reused in its original state. So I actually think there's got to be a business plan with the council, because
So just following along from that line, and I know the comment's been made that it's just been brought to it, but this has been under conversation for years, as far as I'm aware. Like, I've been involved in these conversations with private companies, businesses, people who have offered, but not a full restoration, to shorten, reuse the existing stone. I've had that conversation with, and been told that's not the favoured option. And while I was like, okay, that's fine, but we weren't being asked for $200,000 then. So coming back to Barry's point, I'm not sure at what point someone determined that it has to be the full restoration. I'm not sure if that relates to the heritage thing. I'm not sure if that relates to just a desire to do it. I'm not sure what that relates to. But again, as Barry points and Councillor Dalla points out, a significant amount of the cost is getting new rock, new granite blocks, whereas a shortened option could reutilize most of the existing blocks, etc., etc. So I'm heading down the path of this probably should come back with a fuller business case. I'm not sure there's enough information. It is very late in the day. There are options now. How viable or not, I don't know, because I'm not sure the extent, but they've definitely been raised within this conversation in the past and kind of been dismissed, for want of a better term. But at that point, it was like, well, we've got X amount of money, we can get this extra fundraising, and if that's possible from outside of us, that's great. If there's a shortfall at some point going forward, then like many things that we're discuss. Council will have to revisit that in due course. But right at the moment, I'm struggling to see the support for the $200,000 around the table. That said, I've still got to hear from Councillor Murray, who's the third of the Motueka councillors to speak. And then I'll just double check if Councillor Greening's hand is up in relation to this, and then we'll try and get this one sorted and then move on. Councillor Murray.
I guess the first part is the 200K has come to a surprise to me as well. But this has been on the go. So my 2 terms at community board, this was round and round in circles and got nowhere. So to one of the questions Councillor Walker asked, I have absolutely faith in the people that are behind driving this, and they've done a fantastic job getting to our plan, because 6 years we didn't get anywhere near to this. The challenge I have is in the environment we're in. So we'll get to the next question yet, but the pub talk is we can spend 200K on repairing the wharf in Motueka, but we can't keep the library hours open at $130,000. And how that's funded is absolutely different, but that does make no sense when you're having a conversation with just a normal citizen. So the other part is, would this not be eligible for the Port Endowment Fund? Would this be able to be funded out of the fund? We've lost you. He didn't want to spend the money. So in terms of that question, and I don't think we should be underwriting the full expectation of the lottery grants, because that in essence sort of gives lottery grants a little bit of an out. So support and concept, come back with a business plan would be where I've been, but I actually do take my hat off to the work that the people have done to get it this far.
I'm getting the general impression that it's out in terms of the $200,000. So righto, all good. So back to the further conversation. So I've got Celia, Councillor Butler, Councillor Greening, Councillor Hill, and Deputy Mayor Bryant currently on the list for broader and wider conversation. Councillor Butler.
Oh yeah, thanks, Mayor. Leading on from that, and I hear that Councillor Murray's comment about the talk on the street in Motueka as regards the cuts to the library, and the submissions have shown us that there's a great concern about that. The amount of financial saving is small compared with actually the loss to the service. So that is what concerns me. And I would, just following on from the conversation, I would be happy to see if there was a way that that an adjustment to that library cut would lessen the impact, or else that the library cut is actually doesn't happen. Libraries are developing into hubs, and they're very important to our communities. So it's a question of priority for me.
Okay, Councillor Butler. So can I just come? I know there's going to be other comments in relation to the library, so we may as well just slightly preempt that. So who's the library expert? John. Glenys, you're there as well. Yeah, in terms of experts, I apologise, because Glenys, you're the expert. John, you're just the manager. with other expertise. So 2 questions. One is how much of the overall relates of the savings, which I think is $130,000 a year, relates specifically to Motueka Library and hence the hours. And secondly, I guess to Amy/Dwayne, should the council wish to re-include the $130,000, what is the impact on the 8.8? So I'll come back to you, Dwayne. Glenys.
It's approximately half. The 2 roles, slightly different grading, but approximately half.
Sorry, 75K of the saving relates to Motueka.
So 65.
Sorry.
It was 130. Yeah.
My bad. Okay. And Dwayne, the impact of re-including it on the 8.8?
Through the chair, 0.1%. So you go from 8.8 to 8.9. Ceteris paribus, no other changes.
Yeah, subject to I'm just focusing on this at the moment. Okay, so just for context, in terms of people's comments or feedback in relation, that's the context in which we are working. Okay, thank you. So now I have Councillor Greening.
Thank you. I was going to raise a point of order, but I didn't get the Zoom link until 9 a.m. this morning. So apologies if I was late to the introduction of that. I only thought I'd missed 2 minutes, but clearly we moved quite quickly. Just coming to the Heritage Wharf, and I'll come back to my point of order, but I think I should talk to some of the items that have already been raised. My question in relation to that wharf, and it was popping up in the discussion, was can you just give me an indication of, because it wasn't really clear in the document, are you suggesting there is a health and safety issue driving this investment in the Heritage Wharf?
Yes, through the chair. As the Mayor mentioned, I'm just the manager here, but in the past, it has come up several times that there's a health and safety issue there. Council has put up a fence and then removed the fence. It's a very public space. At the end of it's not stable. So yes, there's an issue. As David mentioned, there's a risk to us that we have to do something, but I think the business case can deal with all of those at the same time, and we can make sure that the health and safety aspects of it are also covered. Thank you, Rob.
So does that mean that the least cost option is putting a fence up? Is that what you're saying?
I don't want to relitigate. We've moved on from it. It's not included in the budget. There is going to be a business case. The options, including fencing, may well be brought back to us in due course, but we're kind of moved on from that particular conversation.
Well, that's my question. So is that the least cost option?
It's a very interim solution, which is relatively low cost, but we've already tried it. It didn't really work.
That's the answer from the staff. I'm sorry, I'm confused. Who's answering the question?
Through the chair, a fence was tried to try and essentially mitigate any risk. There was quite a backlash against that, and it was a bit pointless because everyone was just climbing around it and over it. So it was removed.
So does that mean that if we go down the thing of not funding 200k, that we can't put a fence in place because it didn't work last time? Is that what you're saying?
From the staff's point of view, a fence would be pointless to solve this problem. I think the best approach is to do the business case, look at all the options, including the do nothing option, and then bring it back to council. Thank you, Rob.
Thanks, Rob.
Next.
Okay, my other question is just in relation to standing orders, I suppose, but it seems to be bypassed. And I was just trying to get a handle, because I'd asked these questions before the meeting, about the 2 working day requirement for the public to see these type of agendas. And my understanding was that this was completed sometime on Friday, which would still not meet the 2-day requirement, given this is a 9 a.m. meeting, unless, of course, the agenda was uploaded before 9 a.m.
Through the chair, the agenda was loaded by open of business Friday morning. I can't confirm it was dead on 9 a.m. because there can be a delay with publishing, but yes, it did go out Friday morning.
Yeah. It's just that I understand, because I was aware of this issue before, and that's why I was investigating it. A resident had asked whether it was available, and they were told at 9:30 a.m. that it would be uploaded later that day.
Okay, thank you. I love a good anecdotal story.
It's not anecdotal, it's evidence. I've got the email.
Well, that's fine. So what would you like to do about it? Would you like us to stop the meeting and come back next week, or what's your solution?
So the point of order, the whole point of standing orders is to ensure that these documents are fairly available to the public so they can see them. So I'm just wondering why we wouldn't be pursuing that if that's our standing orders. It just seems to be that the whole process has been rushed through.
Well, so seeing as it's a point of order, then I get to rule on that. I'm ruling that despite the fact there may have been some minor delay, it was still published on Friday morning with all best efforts at 9 a.m. It may have been slightly later than that. That's the information I've received from council staff. So I am ruling that the issue is closed and we're moving on with the meeting. Thank you for raising your concerns, Councillor Greening.
It's okay. It's all about transparency. Interesting to see how transparent we are. My other question is just relation into the library, and it's really a wider issue when you go through a number of these requirements, and the wharf was one example. And it's interesting that the conversation is still pitched on, well, if we add more, then the rates go up. Well, isn't it a question of prioritisation around this discussion? To prioritise within a fiscal envelope, if we are choosing, as I'm assuming some of you might have a fiscal envelope of 8.8 or 8.9. I probably have a lower one, probably more aligned to the local government index of 2% or the CPI of 2.2. But that's where we should be aiming. And I think when you read through all these submissions, there is a concern over the affordability of these things. There is a concern about the prioritisation of the library issue, which they consider to be more important than some other things that the council has embarked upon. I think that we need to be not looking to increase, but to prioritise across some of these decisions, and that's what this deliberation hopefully is about. I think that if we've got any cost pressures here, and we've got a business case that obviously will come back to us with a pitch that will probably require some additional investment one way or another, that we should be looking to offset certain things. I am also concerned that we're considering reducing our investment in the maintenance of streams and waterways, which are stormwater concerns of residents, which is a priority for residents, more of a priority than a new community building, which can be deferred till later when this council is in a more financially robust position. I do think the council generally needs to get its house in order before it starts embarking on another round of serious investments. The overarching story here is the Waimea Dam has consumed all our funding availability in terms of debt as we keep going up. And we need to reevaluate where our funding is going, and the community is not seeing that, and you can see it in the submissions, the frustration that is underlying all these submissions, and they've picked their hobby horse to emphasise and talk about it, but you can see the frustration through it all, and why are you picking on this when you should be not doing this? And I think that's the general flavour of the submissions that were made. I mean, I'm assuming we're going to be talking through each of them individually. I certainly won't be supporting a number of the resolutions that are present today, so we'll be calling a division on the recommendations that are being presented today. So I'll leave it at that and wait for further discussion on the particular items. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. I mean, we'll wait to see what's moved and seconded as to whether or not we go through them individually. Okay, so I've now got Councillor Hill, followed by Deputy Mayor Bryant, and then Councillor Murray and Councillor Ellis and Councillor Walker.
No, this is what I think.
Oh, okay. I'll come back to you, Councillor Hill, in case if you do put your hand up. Deputy Mayor Bryant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just do have a couple of questions, but I'm relatively comfortable with all the resolutions, and I'm happy to move them in their entirety and as in a block. My question just relates to the Dovedale water scheme, and Richard, you might just be able to just have a small concern about reducing that cost if we get a dry year next year, or dry season, and that water becomes restricted to the community there. So, and any risk of rising costs.
Good morning, Michael Collins.
Virtually an expert.
Through the chair. So there is no change to the ultimate goal of delivering water for the treatment plant. And so there is no change to anything now. So if the risk is there now, it's still going to be the same as what the project was anyway. It's just a rephasing of the project slightly. The delivery time is still the same time as in year 3 or 4.
So there's no risk that costs increase escalating?
There's always a little bit of risk, isn't there? So you can't say there's not, but it's the same risk. The risk is not changing.
Thank you.
Okay, so before I look for a seconder, given that there is likely to be some commentary on one particular item in particular in relation to the library funding, so I'll accept Deputy Mayor Bryant's moving. If direction is provided to change the library related issue,
I'm happy to accommodate.
We will come back to the mover. All right, so I have councillors Murray, Ellis and Walker. I suspect it may all be about the library. There may be other things, but certainly the library in particular. I'll start with councillor Murray.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would just encourage the Deputy Mayor to look at, because I take it he's not going to approve Clause 8. I think we've kicked that one. But perhaps Clause 8 could be replaced with and funds X amount of dollars towards library costs. So it's a question about libraries.
Well, eight's about the wharf, isn't it?
Yeah, but we're going to take 8 out.
That will just be removed.
Right, okay. Right.
And then we'll cover the library.
Yep. So I guess my passion is truly about the Motueka part of the service. So when this was brought to council, my understanding, and obviously didn't take pause to understand enough, is what that the role was vacant. What I didn't grasp is the role had been temporarily filled, so it has an absolute impact in terms of the 1st of July. There essentially will be a less person there.
Yes.
And the feedback in terms of the submissions from people in the community about how strongly they support and love their library and don't want reduced hours, I certainly want to be that reinstated. What I don't understand is the impact similarly on the Richmond Library. Is that the same, or has that been vacant and absolutely vacant?
Glenys, over to you.
Yes, thank you, through the chair. Look, it has been vacant for a little longer, since early this year. We have filled some of that time through temporary arrangements with some of our part-time staff, so it hasn't been completely vacant. We have also made cuts to some of our programming and some of what we do to accommodate the fact that we've lost 40 hours a week, essentially.
So I guess around the table, I'd strongly support a starting point of $65,000 for libraries, but if the Richmond Ward councillors want to also readdress the Richmond ones, I'm happy with that. But in terms of reinstating the position in Motueka with the Deputy Mayor's blessing and it's amended, I'd be happy to second on it.
Councillor Bell has indicated a willingness to second, subject to the conclusion of this particular conversation. So I just clarified, Dwayne, so 65k would be less than 0.1%, wouldn't it? It would be
0.005.
Yeah, so it would be a very, very small amount relative to the overall 130, which is the total saving, including both the Richmond changes and Motueka, would be the 0.1. Right, so that just again for context.
And thank you for the wisdom of the Deputy Mayor for accommodating that.
We'll see what the wisdom of the council determines before we get too excited. Councillor Ellis and then Councillor Wolf.
Thank you. Yes, I just wanted some clarification around the numbers. So the 0.01%, was that inclusion of both libraries?
For the chair, yes. Roughly $120,000, I think, is 0.1% or thereabouts. So 130, close enough to 1 decimal point.
Because sorry, excuse me. Because I have an issue. I'm curious about what programs we're going to be losing. There were programs that were brought in to help people that were isolated at home. We've got literacy programs for children, which are a big investment in our community. So are these the types of programs that we would see removed if that funding is reduced?
They are. In Richmond, because that role is based in the children's team, it would have a big impact on the children's services that we provide. In Motueka, it would be a little bit more across the board. And that role is not based in the children's team, but it would have an impact on all of the programs, all of the all aspects of what we do, really, essentially. So yes, it would affect the literacy programs. It would affect our housebound service. You know, we would have to make some cuts across the board.
Okay, thank you. So yes, that has clarified the impact on both libraries. Anything further, Councillor Ellis, Councillor Walker, and then Councillor McKenzie?
Yeah, thank you, through you, Mayor. So it's a little almost like the removal of bins and doggy do bags in my community. So the implications for Motueka is because we have a smaller staffing team, the impacts of losing is much more widespread when it comes to covering holidays, sickness, any unexpected time off. And my community has made it really clear for them that, you know, the Motueka Library is a shelter. It's a place where our community heartbeat is felt and heard. It's a piece of social infrastructure that has an important part keeping our community together and helping people with their well-being. It is an amazing resource. Some of the words from my community have been they are vehemently opposed, and it is reprehensible that we'd even been considering, after the lengths that Motueka went to get their new library, to now be cutting services. So I haven't heard from the Richmond community as much. I've looked through the submissions, and I think what clearly outweighs the Richmond ones. Now, I'm not going to, speak on behalf of the Richmond ward, but for Motueka, I'd like to see that our library hours are reinstated to what they were.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Walker. Councillor McKenzie.
Thank you very much, through you, Mr. Mayor. I'd like to ask the Deputy Mayor if he would be willing to have his moving to reinstate the 130,000 for both the Richmond and the Motueka libraries. Look, I mean, I never really, I didn't support removing it in the first place. These libraries, they're so essential for many in our community who don't have anywhere else to go. It's a release valve for children, for parents, for the elderly. And I just think it's a sad situation if we have to start depriving those sectors of our community of these valuable libraries being open and providing these programs. So I'd like to ask the Deputy Mayor if he would agree to reinstate the 130.
I'm happy to do that for now and cover that off in.
Okay, I think you said cover it off in his right to reply was the second part of that commentary. So there's the wording that has been included in the resolution. Councillor Dowler, are you still happy to second it with that inclusion? Okay, thank you. So I now have Councillor Greening.
So my question in relation to the libraries is does the decrease in funding directly affect the opening hours? You've spoken about it reducing the focus on children's service levels. So is there a way to keep the libraries open while still maintaining the funding reduction, or are they exactly tied to one another?
Yes.
Thank you, through the chair. They are tied together. Essentially, for each library, we need to find 40 hours of staff time, to cover what we were trying to cover before. If we don't reduce our opening hours at each library, then there is even more of an impact on our service desk, on those programs, those things that people value. So it's not much of a saving in terms of the opening hours, but in terms of the staff time, it is a real contribution to what the hours that we need to claw back, if you like.
So just out of interest, how many hours of staff time are required at each library to remain open, and how many hours are currently allocated to each of those libraries, or funded, I should say?
So in terms of what we have proposed removing in terms of hours, so it would be for Richmond, it would be 6 staff hours. it would be the equivalent in Motueka, because what we're also proposing is reducing the Saturday staffing, so there would be reduced hours there. In terms of total number of hours, if I can say that Motueka Library currently has approximately 7 full-time equivalent staff, and Richmond has approximately 18.
Okay, thank you. Sorry, Councillor Greening, anything further?
So I'm just trying to get a sense of whether you're managing the entire portfolio so that the library hours are, so the libraries remain open for the hours that we want them open for. And I'm just wondering, given what I'm hearing, whether you've got quite a lot of hours, it's just a matter of managing them appropriately, or whether you're saying, I've only got enough staff for this many hours, and with this many hours short to keep it open. I didn't get a sense of that. I got a sense of, we seem to have a lot more hours available in Nelson, in Richmond, but we're running it lean in Motueka. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
No, that's actually not what I'm saying. Richmond Library, we staff our service desks at a slightly higher level, because there is 50% of the business for the libraries goes through Richmond Library, which means that those service desks are significantly busier. We have a higher staffing quotient on our roster. We also do a lot of work for the district. For example, we are managing all of our electronic resources, computer systems through Richmond. We are purchasing and cataloguing and processing all of our stock through Richmond. So there is a lot of work for the district done there. Those staff, while they might do a small amount of work on our service desks, that's not the prime part of their role. And to take more of their time for service desks would mean we would be compromising other aspects of our operation.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Green, and Councillor Hill, then Councillor Kinnemont.
Thanks, Chair. I just, the resolution got changed and it appeared really briefly as a screen share. I'm just wanting to get clear that has number 8 been removed? And then was there an additional?
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Hill. So number 8 has changed to request officers investigate options and present a business case back to full council for the Motueka Heritage Wharf Restoration Project. So it's changed from allocating $200,000 to bring back a business case. And secondly, there is an inclusion of an item to reinstate the funding of $130,000 to retain the current opening hours and services at Motueka and Richmond libraries. So that are the two changes.
Oh, thank you. That's just helpful. I thought that what was happening, but good just to see that there. Thank you. And just a question for Glenys. Before the proposal to reduce funding by $130,000, would you say that the ship has run pretty lean? Do you have
through the chair, yes, I would. Yeah, I look at the staffing levels at some other libraries of a similar size. I think in terms of what we do and in terms of our interactions with our community, how busy we are in terms of visitor numbers, issues, all of those metrics, we do incredibly well. And I have never considered that we have much leeway in the way of staffing.
Thank you. As the resolution sitting at the moment, I'll be supporting it in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Hill. Councillor Kinnemont.
Thank you, through the chair. Richmond Library, do you have any volunteers working there? And if you do, a gut feeling of what percentage or how much of the daily input do they put into the library?
The only volunteers we have at any of our libraries are involved in a housebound service. So some will do selections of items for our housebound clients. Mostly they deliver for our housebound clients.
Okay, thank you. Anything further? Councillor Greening?
Are we moving through these topics, or are we just waiting for people to raise them? I'm just trying to get a sense of how this is.
So I have a mover and a seconder for the amended resolution, which covers all of the topics that are contained. I've noted your request to call that by a division, so we will do that in due course. If you have further questions on items, then you are certainly welcome to ask them.
Okay, so the RFC funding for Keep Motueka Beautiful, I'm just trying to understand that. I would have thought that if Keep Motueka Beautiful needs more money, it would just get a greater portion of the grants funding that we allocate to grants, rather than having to top it up and make a bigger. I mean, basically, it's offsetting the grants. So I'm just wondering why are we not doing that? Why are we not just operating through the grants and given they have more important work than other grant applications, giving them more funding through the grants process?
Okay, who's answering that question in relation to Keep Motueka Beautiful funding from RFCs?
I don't know if that grant is online, but the obvious answer to me anyway is that reserve financial contributions are for building stuff. And to the extent that they're asking for operating money, it's not appropriate to use RFCs for that.
Correct. So that's the way I've interpreted the wording, which is approves funding from the reserve fund for projects on the council's reserves. So it very specifically is project related on our reserves. And I'm assuming, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, that we're working on the basis that in getting Keep Motueka Beautiful to deliver those projects is the most cost effective way of doing so. And given that they are by nature capital projects on reserves, then that's appropriate use of the funding. Not as suggested, or the question is reasonable, it's not operational funding for Keep Motueka Beautiful.
But just that Keep Motueka Beautiful operates on all our reserves and does work around the community. So I'm just wondering why suddenly it needs to have RFC funding rather than grants funding.
Well, so it's not getting it. The projects are getting RFC funding. They happen to be delivered by Keep Motueka Beautiful. That is the way I understand the wording, but I'm happy to have that confirmed by whoever the appropriate council staff person is. Councillor Dowler.
Yeah, actually, just a clarification that the RFCs normally were approved by the community board while they were spent.
Yeah, so RFCs, there is a component of whether it's ward councillors or in the case of Golden Bay and Motueka approval, but they still need to be, the overall budgets need to be approved by council. Although the prioritisation and decision making around what might be done within is usually via consultation with either the community board, in the community board's case, or ward councillors in other wards.
Because that's why I just thought it might be better to throw it to the community board for a special project fund.
Yeah, I mean, I don't understand why this needs a resolution. The MOT councillors run the RFC fund. They set the budget. They allocate where the funds go.
Either which way, we're either approving it here. In terms of transparency, it's a good thing. So everyone's clear that we are approving.
So we're now approving all RFC budgets now? Is that what we're saying?
Well, ultimately, we are responsible for approving RFC budgets, yes.
So are we adding $5,000? I mean, it just seems a bit redundant. But anyway, okay, fair enough. I merely asked the question because I don't want to see effectively funding that would have funded Keep Motueka Beautiful being funded through grants, and now they're getting funding from RFC. So there's more grants funding for other things when we're trying to contain our budgets and effectively reduce the pressure on rates increases, which effectively I'm also asking the question, does this, and I'm assuming it won't put funding pressure on rates? No, I don't think it would.
Through the chair, no. The reserve financial contributions accounts are closed accounts, and what goes out of them is community facilities and projects. What goes into them is reserve financial contributions from development.
Yeah, so it just puts pressure on other pre-budgeted things in the RFC. So effectively, given Richmond has already kind of set its budget, you're effectively going in and redirecting where that budget will be spending its money by 5K.
Right.
The other, yeah, because I'm
Yeah,
in,
carry
there's
on.
no structure
Yes.
here, so I just think that's a bit strange to do, but anyway, there it is. The Chamber of Commerce 25k funding. I'm just wondering where that came from. Is this a staff initiative? Is this from the chamber?
So I'll get John to clarify in terms of the wind up of the National Tasman Business Trust and the transfer of funding is what I'm assuming this is, from then to the Nelson Tasman Chamber of Commerce to deliver the same service.
Yeah, we thought it was important for transparency. So this, as the Mayor has alluded to, was previously to provide mentoring services to business. The organisation running that has now disappeared. So the intention here is to transfer that funding to the Chamber of Commerce to deliver exactly the same mentoring programme.
So my concern with this is that unless we've got a specific service agreement, and that's not mentioned in here, that we're going to get delivered 25k of mentoring for Richmond people and not just Nelson. I have a concern with that. I also wonder why we're not exploring shifting funding to Richmond Unlimited, who are more focused on the Tasman region, or even Motueka providers, rather than through the chamber. To me, it seems that this is an opportunity to.
So I'll come across the pit in terms of who focuses on what, but I assume the Chamber of Commerce actually covers the region as a whole, as does the mentoring, not just Nelson and or Richmond, as mentioned.
Yes, through the chair, that is correct. The Chamber of Commerce covers Nelson, Tasman, the whole region, and we will have a funding agreement that identifies the performance measures that they will deliver for the 25,000.
Okay, thank you.
So is there a reason why we didn't go to Richmond Unlimited, who could probably do this as well, or were they not consulted?
My understanding is Richmond Unlimited don't provide a mentoring service, whereas the Chamber of Commerce already did via other funding. And this is actually a rationalisation of the people delivering mentoring services across the region, which in my view is actually a good thing. More mentoring, less administration.
So did we consult with Richmond Unlimited or not?
Just say no. No.
Brilliant.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so my last question, because again it's unstructured, is around parking. I think a number of residents, the majority of which are opposing what you're proposing, even going back earlier on this being mooted in far earlier consultations, has been thoroughly rejected. I suspect because of the limited time span we probably didn't get as much, but it's interesting to see the weight that was given in feedback to this, which was a highly controversial aspect. I see no benefit in doing this apart from a revenue grab. It's not going to control or reduce or change any of the parking. You're just taking funds from ratepayers again. It's implicitly another rates grab. It's not solving any problems apart from people who need to park now having to pay for it. So I'm opposed to this. I think it's really bad for branding as well. Richmond businesses really emphasise the free parking ability, and it certainly attracts people from Nelson to Richmond. And it seems a really petty thing to do for not much money. And I imagine the branding value alone would be worth more than the money you're projecting to raise. So I don't support this at all, and a majority of the community don't either. Certainly a majority of the submitters.
I'm glad you clarified that, because submitters and the majority of the community are not necessarily the same thing, as I guess we're all aware. But point noted, Councillor Greening, you are opposed to
earlier
charge for
submissions
parking.
at other consultations have had far larger feedback than the 83, because this was only a 2-week process. But in earlier places where we've signalled this, we've had a lot of negative feedback over it. So it's no surprising that there's been a very small amount of submitters, given the very limited time that people had to be aware of it. And
Thank you, Councillor Greening. So next I have Councillor Kinnemont and no, all good. Councillor Hill and then Councillor Dowler.
Thank you, Chair. Just on the parking, Do we think that it's hard to know, isn't it? Because I'm asking you what you think about what everybody thinks. But do we think that there's been enough clarification around the parking that people, perhaps even us all in the room, or some in the room, or some out of the room, understand what's actually happening, and that the other parking isn't changing? So I see some people's comments around one of the great things about Richmond is the free parking, and do we think that people have understood what's happening and that there isn't an impact on nearly all of the parking in Richmond? No changes there.
Dwayne.
Through the chair, through the newsline articles on Shape Tasman on social media, we tried to make it as clear as possible that it affected 20% of the car parking in Richmond. And it was only affecting all-day car parking, not people who turned up in time-restricted park, do shopping, et cetera, et cetera. I did see some social media feed where people got the wrong end of the stick and they thought it was applying to all car parking, and noted that what was pleasing is that several people inside of that chat corrected the people in the same chat about what our proposal was. So I certainly think that we tried to make it as clear as possible, and that there was at least within social media enough people understood to point it out to others.
Just for clarity, sorry, Councillor, I'll come back to you. So 20% of our parking is affected, or 20% of all the parking provided in Richmond?
20% of our off-street car parking.
So not including the mall, Kmart, the warehouse, the literally thousands, well, hundreds of other free car parks that are provided in that gigantic area in the centre of Richmond, where lots of people come to shop and enjoy the marvellous free parking, which is still being provided in Richmond. So no doubt the media will pick up on that. We're not reporting the content to this conversation. So 20% of our off-street parking, not 20% of all the parking in Richmond, which is probably at least 50% of which is provided by private enterprise. Okay, thank you. Good clarification. Councillor Hill.
Yeah, thank you. Your expression there, Mayor Tim, was all about what I was thinking. And I think sometimes even when we communicate clearly, and I think we largely do, there are still things that are missed or get interpreted incorrectly. So I think when should this resolution pass and the parking changes are a goer, if we can maybe just have an expanded communication around the implication that yes, it is just 20% of ours, and all of this other isn't impacted, that would be good. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Hill. So Councillor Ellis, Councillor Dowler, Councillor Maru.
Thank you, through you, Mayor. I've got a question and then probably a comment regarding the parking. I'm just interested in the agrees to decrease the assumed revenue from 100,000 to 40,000, but there's been no comment about what capital outlay we're going to have in that period of time. So is that a net 40,000 or is that a gross 40,000 in revenue?
Dwayne.
Through the chair, it's the net amount of operating revenue and operating costs. There is revenue that comes into the parking, and there's in all of the machine service providers that are available, there's a transactional cost involved, and so that figure is a net amount. In terms of capital, there is $50,000 budgeted in the annual plan. We rechecked that. And there are a range of providers that go from our budget up to twice our budget. But we think our budget of $50,000 is about right for the capital.
Okie dokie. Anything further? It seems as though you might like to say something else.
I'm just curious of, it seems like quite the outlay with a bit of risk for a minimal increase if we don't delay it until the next long-term plan to implement. And then we actually get some really good feedback from the community, because as you've stated, it is pretty mixed.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Look, I think this is one of the challenges. So if you go back through this whole conversation we've had, we're very reluctant to cut anything or charge for anything, but we want rates kept down. So at some point, I know some of these things seem like relatively small sums of money, 40,000 moving to 100,000 over 3 years, 130,000 for the library was a saving, now a cost. But if you times that by 10 years, that is across the two things, $2.3 million. So things do add up over time. And I guess my sense is we've kind of went hard early, and when rubbish tins were mentioned and we backtracked out of that, again, community feedback, understand why. Same with libraries, backtracked out of that, community feedback, understand why. Parking, community feedback, we could, but at some point, all of these hundreds of thousands per year, every year, add up. And that what ultimately leads you to a difference between a single-digit rate increase and a double-digit rate increase. And if you look around the country, I'm sure lots of councils are having similar conversations over services versus rates increases. And we're not at the higher end of that conversation. We're not at the lowest end either. But my sense is we kind of went hard and then we're like, oh, and we backtrack out of it. And I get that in of themselves, 100,000 here, 150,000 there aren't hugely significant in a budget of a couple of $100 million. But if we don't start having these conversations and stick with some of them, then we're buying ourselves a bigger challenge down the track. It is a tricky conversation. Councillor Ellis.
Well, I agree with you, and I fundamentally am not opposed to this point. But what my issue is, and Dwayne's made the comment that there is a range of suppliers, and my concern is the risk that the difference in profit is $40,000, that some of the suppliers of the capital that we need to implement this program could be double the $50,000 that we've budgeted for implementation. And that is what makes me weary, is that very quickly that 40,000, because of the delayed implementation of that, could increase so that we make zero profit out of it. It's just a concern for me that I want to flag.
Through the chair, that the $50,000 in capital is a one-off. It would need to be renewed sometime every 10 years. But once that's in place, the net revenue per annum, once it's in place for a full year, is $100,000. So if we don't do this now, for example, then we rediscuss this maybe for next year, then we're in the same position where we have a delay of 6 months. So at some point, you've got to put a stake in the ground and say we're doing it.
Yeah. Okay, thanks, Dwayne. Point noted, Councillor Ellis. Like all of these things, expectations of return and revenue need to be matched by control of capital expenditure and operating costs. Otherwise, you can end up in a net zero game, which was not what we're trying to achieve. Councillor Dowler, then Councillor Mara, then Councillor Greening.
That's just two questions. Does this affect the car parking strategy and all that's in place, I presume?
Dwayne.
Through the chair, no, it's absolutely consistent with the car parking strategy.
Cool. Second question. Don't disagree that it should happen. I think it should. But what would be the deal if we pushed it out just towards the end of the financial year for the spending instead of after the busy period at Christmas? Get a quote now for the job to be done in May or something next year, and then all of a sudden, into the year, that'll give you a better money return.
Dwayne.
So we still need the capital to help roll it out. Think about it as roughly every month we delay, it's about a $10,000, $8,000 loss in revenue. So if we push up from February to May, we'd get maybe $10,000 or $20,000 in revenue.
Councillor Murray, then Councillor Greening.
So fundamentally, I guess I asked the question is there a shortage of parking in Richmond? And I don't think there is after we've heard all the hundreds that are available and that sort of thing. So if we call it what it was, or what it is, and that's a return on our land and we have an income from it, I can swallow that and go, so it is an income grab, I've got it. The underlying challenge I have is the last time we did fees and charges, we were going to get a budget on the increased compliance costs. So I've read some fee figures in one of the submitters, but I still don't have that budget because part of this income is going to subsidise our parking ordinance, I suspect. And so it's my last attempt to go. I'm still not over that line where we are with those additional costs. Still haven't seen a budget. Did read some summarised figures in one of the submitters to the plan, so they must be somewhere.
Through the chair, I cannot give you the answer about how it relates to the parking budgets. I'd have to call down Shannon to give you a definitive answer on that. What I do know is one of the suppliers we're looking at is already partnered with our enforcement team and the technology we use. So I believe it's low cost, but I would need to get Shannon down to confirm.
And the budget for compliance?
So as your question, so we've always had a conversation about the compliance budget, which alongside a certain four-legged friend that compliance deal with, there are other compliance issues, including parking. Is your question how much of the cost of compliance is built into the compliance budget and assumptions around revenue that comes from where people don't,
how much
versus how much might come off the 40k or 100k over a full year? So is the 100k net of any cost of compliance?
Correct.
Okay. Yeah. Is the 100k assumption net of any cost of compliance, Dwayne?
Yes, I believe so. I understand Kim's here, can correct me if I'm wrong, but we have, I think, 2 staff now who do parking enforcement. And just to be clear, the sites that they'll be monitoring are sites we already monitor.
Okay. So the 100k revenue is net of compliance costs. Kim? What year? 40k first year, 100k full year.
Through the chair, it's a little bit hard to pin this down at this point in time. Obviously, we have got a compliance capability. We have a new set of arrangements that would come in, but as Dwayne says, that it's offset by the fact we've got some existing obligations. So I think you could say about it's balanced. It's in those numbers. But the proof will be in the pudding once we get it over the line. Exactly, you understand what it is that we have to have oversight of, what time frame is going to be implemented, because these things are still up in the air.
So would this be similar to a business case for a wharf and Motueka that we've just delayed?
No, I don't think it's similar to a business case for a wharf and Motueka at all. I think we're working on the basis from Dwayne's answer, which was very unequivocal, which is that it is net of. And we have existing compliance, and unless the council decides to increase the compliance cost, which is a council decision, not a staff one, then we can work on the basis that it is covered and it's net. Should staff come back and say, look, we now have this additional parking cost complexity and issues and we need more resources, that will be a decision the council will have to consider. And I suspect I know what the answer is. But in the absence of any council decision to change the compliance, number of people involved, etc., I think we'll take the fact that it is currently budgeted to be net of compliance costs.
One last question, if I can. So if we didn't implement the parking strategy, what would be the net difference in terms of the compliance costs that we're not meeting?
Yeah.
Through the chair, the parking strategy is more than just paid parking in these 168 locations. It is the way we manage the time restricted parking in both Motueka and the town centre, which we do police, which was of words daily. And also that we've already contemplated the fact that as the community grows, that we will accept that there's a bit of spillover into the surrounding community and manage that in a particular way. So it's much wider than just paid parking. Paid parking is intended to help manage demand for commuter parking and to help recover some of the costs that we legitimately incur in providing this.
So there would be no reduction in the cost of compliance from introducing this, because we're utilising the same resources we're already using to monitor the current range of time-bound parking across the district.
So just one last thing, I'm going to let it go. Because the bit we've been through this when we brought it internally is we have an increased level of service from last year. and that has an increased cost. And now we're having a balance because we're going to be monitoring those sites. But this is an increased level of service, whether it's woof-woofs or boom-brooms. and I still haven't got a tangible. So if we didn't have that increased level of service, would we be hunting this so much, or would we have a bigger surplus?
Look, I can say through the chair that parking strategy 2018 predates all of this conversation around the tight financial pressure. It's a philosophy that that council adopted, that it will introduce paid parking for commuter parking at some stage when time, money is particularly tight. Seems like a good time to do so and recover some of those costs that we incur.
Yeah, thank you. Councillor Dakey, did I see your hand go up? And then I'll come back to Councillor Green.
Thank you through the chair. Just a bit of an objection to the statement of it's some sort of money grab or some sort of idea of revenue gathering. It's totally not. Richmond is starting to get the near full capacity for parking. We have a situation where in some cases people are parking in our all-day parks, hopping on the bus and driving into, travelling into Nelson. Our all-day parking in our car parks is designed for Richmond users, and it's designed to provide access to shops and businesses and services. We have people who are taking up parks essentially that could be used to produce revenue for businesses. The idea of this strategy is to provide turnover of parks and support businesses, not to try and gather revenue. And to that point, I wonder if we should add in there that the revenue gathered is only for car park maintenance, just to provide that clarity, because we're not after money, we're after providing parking, we're after maintaining our ability to park, and to that end, it won't be on Saturdays and Sundays. It's only at the busy times when parking is becoming restricted. So this needs to happen. No one likes it. In fact, in my household, it's probably the most unpopular thing I've ever said. So, look, no one wants to pay for parking, but that's where we are. And over 10 years, we're talking about $1 million worth of revenue. So we have to bite the bullet and do it.
Thank you, Councillor Dakey. Well summed up. I wish that was the least popular thing I'd ever said in my household, but unfortunately, I can think of way more unpopular things. Just a clarification, Dwayne, over the use of the revenue.
Through the accounts, it is in fact going to car parking maintenance. I don't mind at all if you want to make that clear in the resolution. That's entirely consistent with what we planned. Yep. Sorry,
thank you. Good clarification.
It's revenue, because there will be revenue that goes towards transactional costs. If you don't
so
mind.
net revenue is for, I don't even take out only car park maintenance. Okay, thank you. Is there anything further before? There doesn't appear to be. I will just ask Richard either to confirm that issue around the $5,000 for RFCs for keeping Motueka beautiful.
Okay, yes, through the chair, the $5,000 is to enable Keep Motueka Beautiful to undertake capital projects within our parks and reserves. The projects have to be agreed by the reserve officer and discussed prior to that. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Richard. Thanks for that clarification. Oh, hand was down, hand now up. Councillor Greening, and then I'll come to Deputy Mayor Brian for his right of reply.
Yeah, so I probably disagree with Councillor Dalkey, apart from the fact that it is controversial on parking. Look, you don't have to grab revenue to control availability of demand. You do that through time controls. As acknowledged by staff, there is likely to be flight. People can choose not to pay, in which case the whole purpose of these car parks is to encourage people to park there rather than on our streets. And I suspect this will create more noise downstream and will create more pressure and more compliance issues and escalating costs. And as acknowledged by staff, they are doing this because there is demand on revenue. It is revenue driven. It has nothing to do with demand. So I totally disagree with what you're doing. I appreciate this is a revenue grab. There's no way you can ignore that. If you wanted to control demand, it would be through time controls, which do not require funding, and you have a compliance team to monitor that, as we already do. So I think you will create more problems. This will be the start of the wedge. I think you're going down the wrong track. And I have to totally disagree with my colleagues and probably the majority of you in supporting this, because I think this is the wrong way that you should be dealing with this problem. I suspect some of the problem is driven by the escalating staff that we have in the area, and maybe we should be directing them to park in different spaces. But anyway, I'll leave it at that, but I will be opposing this resolution, and therefore I have to oppose all of it because it's all moved together. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Councillor Greening. Point noted. Deputy Mayor Bryant. Oh, sorry. Councillor Dowler, did you have a... Yeah?
Mine was to do with the $1 million to buy the land out of Mapua, actually. I know we've got to wait for the master plan to go through and everything like that. But is that actually a priority in this 12 months or not?
Dwayne.
Through the chair, the Strategy and Policy Committee will be considering this matter tomorrow. Effectively, the advice of staff is either we include, I hope you understand the context, include the Drewry's land in the master plan and progress the purchase reasonably quickly, or at least provide the budget for staff to progress it, or take it out. So if you choose not to support that today, well, that effectively will determine that decision tomorrow.
Or alternatively, your decision tomorrow may be determined by the fact that you're weighing up the expenditure of X amount of money versus an alternative which doesn't involve you spending money. Correct. Either which way, the decision remains with council. This is a provision for the eventuality of one of those options, but the option remains entirely within council's decision-making capacity. So
the other one was the 250k for the water in Richmond South. It says, in my word, it'd be nice to have. Doesn't say it has to be there. Just trying to find where it is in the wording.
Number 10. Oh, sorry, you wanted the...
Yeah, and the graphic thing there, that it said that it was okay, or we may do it, we could do it, or didn't say we have to.
Apologies if that was unclear. So through the chair, what we're in the October last year, Russell brought forward a paper to bring forward the trunk main and the Richmond South Reservoir project. Very significant, I think, collectively, something like the total trunk main project and the reservoir are over $12 million collectively. As part of that, there was a slight overlooking of the fact that there needs to be a feeder pipe down from the reservoir to the development area that's intended to serve us. So when we identified this a month ago, we realised the best time to put that feeder pipe in is exactly the same time that you got your wastewater main, your water main in the same trench. So this is an opportunity for us to save an enormous amount of money rather than coming back and doing it later in the same corridor. Okay. And sorry, it does allow us to go hand on heart to commissioners that we can rezone that 17 hectares. Without it, we won't be able to.
Yeah, okay. Keep that one whole fix it all, but development contributions, why haven't we had a thought about bringing them up now instead of waiting to 2027?
Through the chair, there were as part of a series of workshops last year on DCs, we did ask you if you wanted to review the charges themselves. We noted there was, during the LTP process, the council brought forward $3.6 million of stormwater land acquisition down here, and it went from one year to another and it got missed out of calculations. And that was an example. We said, well, we could increase the charges. I think it increased the charges by something like $800 in the Waimea area. And you said at that time, gave us direction that you were happy just to move with the other changes and not that. We can review that though. So if we want to, not for the forthcoming financial year, but for the following one, we can review it at a cycle and include all of these costs in there and have new charges from 1 July 26.
Well, I'm going to go back to our good old Motueka Airport, actually, because when someone builds a hangar over there, they actually pay DCs for stormwater charges, which is not in any 10-year plan that I know of to get piping to these hangars and stuff like that. But they're prepaying it now. So I'm just wondering why we aren't prepaying that now.
Through the chair, so there is literally over 100 projects, I think, in the DC schedules. Some of those projects are built and recover from development going forward, and some, quite a lot of them actually, do pre-fund capital before development occurs. In the case of Motueka, a large portion of the airfields drain into the catchment, which ultimately leads to the project we've just done, which is thank you. So that's why they're included. And so that's an example of a project that was both pre-funded and will continue being funded after its construction through DCs.
Okay, thank you. Yeah.
So as part of this, because I have to chair that meeting tomorrow in relation to item 5, my understanding is that 80% of that will be funded by DCs over time.
Correct, that's the proposal.
Okay, thank you. Yeah. No, that's fine. Don't forget it. It's a bad sign.
I'm just concerned about the, and I'm going to put my Motueka hat on, the Motueka Museum, no additional funding. So I presume that they're not going to get the inflation adjustment that's in the long-term plan for the next 12 months. Is that correct?
Through the chair, they received a funding grant for 1 year, and they've asked for a 15,000 increase on top of that funding grant. The recommendation is to.
I was at another meeting when they had that meeting, so they couldn't know. But yeah, but they will still get the inflation grant.
Adjustment.
It was a grant, so I don't believe.
But they also get annual funding, right? Do they not?
This is in relation to their grant funding of 108,836. I understand the letter indicated.
The grants aren't automatically inflation adjusted.
So their annual funding is by way of grant.
Yes.
And it has not been inflation adjusted.
It's fixed.
So everything we inflation adjust across the border, I presume on hold too. Thank you very much.
So you can make the call to inflation adjust that.
Yeah, so if it's just clarified museum funding, the provincial museum done by a different method, inflation adjusted or nay?
The Nelson Tower, that is inflation adjusted, yeah.
Okay. Oh, sorry. So they have applied or will apply for next year's grant funding when?
They don't apply. I think it's an agreement we have, isn't it, with the period of the long-term plans. We'd have a 3 year.
I was going to say, so it's not like a grant.
No.
Yeah, so hence it is an annual funding that we've agreed.
Yeah. Yeah. But we
in the
just
long-term plan.
Yes, but we just don't inflation proof it.
So yeah, it is a fixed amount. So inflation adjusting it is conceivably doable. I imagine I'm picking this as not gigantic sums of money.
It's not, and it can come. I mean, if you desire to, we'd have to work out what the impact it has on the rest of the grant pot.
What I'm getting from Barry is that they've applied for it and they want an additional $15,000 over above because they always talk at meetings about they're going to get just a little bit more money each year because of the inflation package. But if they've come and asked for an additional 15, whatever, I can understand that we're saying no to that. But I'd be really gutted if you didn't do the inflation stuff when others are getting the inflation stuff.
Right. So can someone clarify? Should I, Alan?
I have not been involved with this before, but I've just looked up the funding agreement and it indicates it's an annual grant that's inflation adjusted for each of the 25, 26 and 27.
Well, that clarifies that. So it is going to be inflation adjusted because that's what the funding agreement says. Nice and simple. Thank you for raising that, Barry. It's good clarification. Is there anything further anyone wishes to provide feedback on before I come across to Councillor Dowler. Oh, sorry, Councillor Dowler. Deputy Mayor Bryant for his right of reply. Comment, feedback, general, anything. Councillor Walker.
Through you, Mayor. So I just want a point of clarification around Keep Motueka Beautiful, Richmond, other groups. So with the item in today's agenda, number 4, is that over and above what they've already got? Because they too sit in other realms receiving money. So when they were at Community Board last month and we were looking at special projects and they flipped some money aside for them there, is that a different project or is that to maintain the reserves as this 5K is? I just don't understand how many ways you can tap into a bucket. And like, I totally support Keep Motueka Beautiful and the mahi they do for us. But I'm just sitting there, so Richmond's not there. So it's a little bit like if we had have said yes to the Motueka Museum, with that rolled out to the other museums, Golden Bay, for example. But can I just have an understanding, because I know that Richard came in before, but I didn't get an opportunity to ask then.
I think the first thing is not maintenance. It's Richard made it very clear it's for capital projects, albeit they are obviously relatively small for $5,000. I'll come across to Mike, see if he can add.
Through you, Mr. Mayor. So organisations have 2 routes to get support from council. They come directly to council through the grants process. We're pretty familiar with that. Also, if they are in Motueka or in Golden Bay, they can approach the community boards. Any funding granted by the community board is in addition to the funding they get from council. So it would be appropriate for the community boards, when they're considering those funding requests, to ask people like Keep Motueka Beautiful what other funding they have received from council and include that in their considerations.
And I'm assuming should Keep Richmond Beautiful have a desire, need, or otherwise, they would have approached council through one way, shape, or form as well. So, I mean, it's $5,000. It's out of RFCs. I get the desire to clarify the relationship between Keep Richmond Beautiful and Keep Motueka Beautiful in terms of the different funding options. But I'm not sure.
But I just needed to understand why my brother over here wouldn't be getting that when
he may not have asked. I don't know. Glenn.
Thank you, Chair. The reason is, and I thought about this too, it's simply because they applied through the annual plan, and Keep Richmond Beautiful have predominantly gone through community grants. In the coming year, the Richmond Ward councillors have put a baseline reserve RSC amount, which is just incidental mix, and from that, I believe Officer Hilton is going to consider projects on a case-by-case basis. So it's happening, but it isn't visible through the annual plan. So I think there will be an alignment there. It's just not through this process.
Okay, I think it is a good point coming back to Councillor Walker's question, and actually the question that Councillor Greening raised earlier, is that clarity over the processes that they use, because while I'm not uncomfortable with the facts in your annual plan because that's the process they chose to go through to ask for the funding, the fact is it's been done slightly differently through Richmond's RFCs. I think we probably just need to have one process for both of those groups to come through both grants and or RFCs, and the Motueka Keep Motueka has the third option, which Richmond doesn't have, of accessing funding through the community board. So if that can be noted through the feedback.
Nice to know we're being fair and just across the whole district.
Fair and just. Okie dokie. Righto. Anything further before I come to Deputy Mayor Bryant? It appears not. Deputy Mayor Bryant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. It's been an interesting and long discussion. So I will respond to a few of the issues raised, and I'll just work through them in some sort of semi-logical order. So firstly, Councillor Mackenzie raised the issue around the application to the landfill business unit around waste levies. We do need to do that and encourage the NTRB landfill business unit to increase the levy distribution to us. So we have to ask for that to happen. But it's just money go around that whole system. Waste levies comes paid by our constituents and Nelsons and comes back to us. So we encourage David to do that. Then turning to the Mott Heritage Wharf, I agree with the course of action that we're proposing. That seems fine. In relation to the library, I just need to say that I've become a more frequent user of the library and understand a little bit more around how it works. And there's 2 or 3 things to note. They have 2 automated machines at Richmond, which do help in times. But even with those, the staff are quite often a number of people in the queue to be served by the staff. The staff do a really good job. And the thing I've noticed, I've not only been going on Sundays, but other days during the week now, and there's an increasing number of people from across the whole community using those libraries for all sorts of reasons. And it will be a little bit more challenging, particularly here in Richmond, as they go through the rebuild process. So I think the allocation for the libraries is well needed for all of those reasons. Coming to car parking, it's relatively low cost, what we're intending to do. It's a relatively small price to pay for a secure park for all day in relation to what you would pay in many other areas. It was signalled in the parking strategy in 2018, so we're now 17 years later, bringing in a small increase. 7 years later, sorry, not 17. It does seem like 17 at all. At that time, the strategy, we thought that some of the reason behind the strategy is to encourage people to find other modes of transport or cycle, walk, which many are now doing. And so this will further help that. The other thing we need to, and it was in some of the submissions, and I know Councillor Greening's raised it previously, encourage the AMP Association to provide alternative day parking down there, as which they do in Green Lane and Auckland. The showgrounds there does you provide all day parking, and so communities get used to that. So that's something we should be encouraging over the longer term, I think. So I think we're on the right track with that. And then just in relation to the Motueka Museum funding, I think the important thing to consider if we are going to increase it to the Motueka Museum, we need to consider all the other museums across the district, because that's where we've got ourselves into a spot of other times. We need to be consistent if we're going to increase the grant, whether it's an annual or special, to take in consideration of the Golden Bay, Takaya Museum and the Murchison Museum. Overall, I think, though, we've ended up in a good place with this annual plan, and obviously it will have to come back to full council in June. So relatively comfortable with that. But before I conclude, I'd just like to thank all the staff that have been involved, from the CEO and the leadership team that have put in an effort, and all those staff in the room who've contributed to this, and the staff that sit behind them. It's been a tight time frame and relatively concise, particularly to receive the submissions and assess them for us to consider. So all in well, it's been a process at this stage that's been well inputted by councillors. And so I urge you all to support the resolutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Bryant. Well replied. I will now come across to call the vote by division as requested by Councillor Greening.
Mayor Bryant.
For.
Councillor Butler.
For.
Councillor Dakey.
For.
Councillor Ellis.
For.
Councillor Greening.
Against.
Councillor Hill.
For.
Councillor Walker.
For.
Councillor Shellcrest.
For.
Councillor Maru.
For.
Councillor Mayling.
For.
Councillor Mackenzie.
For.
Councillor Kinmonth.
For.
Mayor King.
For.
Oh, Dowler, sorry. Councillor Dowler, sorry, Barry.
I know I'm not going to be here shortly, but I am here today.
Sorry. Is that a yes or a no? Yes. Thank you.
The resolution is carried. One vote against. Right, thank you very much. Thank you, as Stuart said, to everyone who's been involved. It has been challenging. There will remain challenges. I think we're all pretty cognizant of the fact that post LTP, when you set tight budgets and there is a responsibility on staff in the organisation to manage within those, that things happen that are potentially outside everyone's control. And so the true proof being in the pudding isn't really not until we get to the end of the coming financial year and see how closely we've been able to match the budgets, so the final expenditure / revenue to what's been planned. Working on the basis that everyone will do their best efforts to achieve that. I think agreeing with Councillor Bryant summing up on the resolution, we've arrived at a pretty reasonable place. I think, again, a number of those things, despite my comments to Councillor Ellis's feedback earlier, I think we have listened to some of that feedback, both in the course of the process around things like the rubbish tin and then through the more formal submission process around libraries in particular. At the end of the day, it is a very challenging environment to be working in, and whether that's in reducing costs or increasing revenue, there are only so many levers that we have. Neither of them are very popular, but then nor are rates increases. So it is a bit of a devil in deep blue sea conversation at the moment in terms of trying to balance fees and charges, revenue through direct revenue creation, for example, parking, and managing costs in some of those areas where a lot of cost, the library service is a costly part of council business. But I think what's been reflected in both the conversation around the table and the feedback in the community is, despite the fact it is a costly part of our business, and perhaps one of those things that central government, as they consider their future local government policy mix, might not consider core service. I think it very clearly feedback from the community as they do see it as core. And I did note with some interest actually with the conversation about core services, and sorry to kind of divert, but the government's very keen, and I think they're quite, water, rubbish, roads, three waters, pretty much stops the list there. Libraries didn't really feature. But I did note yesterday the Minister of Culture and Heritage opening a new music centre underneath the town hall in Wellington for wonderful musical stuff, and the New Zealand Symphony Orchestra. And I did wonder whether that was indeed the core business of the government, as opposed to Three Waters infrastructure, roading, etc. So interesting comparison, I thought. So thank you very much for everyone's feedback, input. I know it's been a tough process to go through. Work to be done yet, but with that I will close the meeting, and I'll close with karakia. Kua mutu a mātou mahi mō tēnei wā, manakitia mātou o mātou hoa o mātou whānau katoa, aio kiti aorangi e tau mai ana. Thank you very much, everybody.